Okay, so Be'ezras Hashem, we are continuing with our weekly series of Shirim, the Torah of Recovery with the Light Revealed. And what we're going to discuss this week in Parsha Shlach is going to be the encounter of coming into Eretz Yisrael. Now, the land of Israel, while it represents a geographic location, it also represents a spiritual concept. And in addition to representing a spiritual concept, it also represents a state of mind. Now, these secondary definitions of the land of Israel, the state of mind, the spiritual concept, they are not separate from the actual reality of Eretz Yisrael, but rather they are part and parcel of the reality of the land of Israel, meaning to say that there is the way of experiencing the land of Israel while being in the land of Israel. But if one finds themselves outside of the land of Israel, then they are capable of tapping into the concept of Eretz Yisrael, whether it be by way of the heart or whether it be by way of the mind. Now, in Chabad, the Tzemach Tzedek was asked by a chassid about coming to Eretz Yisrael, about arriving in actual Eretz Yisrael. And what the Tzemach Tzedek responded was, make Eretz Yisrael here. And this quality of making Eretz Yisrael wherever a person finds themselves is the way that one taps into Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel, prior to their actual arrival in the land of Israel. And if a person has not yet arrived in the land of Israel, so then that experience of connecting to Eretz Yisrael, wherever they find themselves, is actually drawing down the light of Eretz Yisrael to wherever a person finds themselves. Rabbi Nachman also teaches us this secret. The Zohar HaKadosh teaches us this secret. Chazal teach us this secret, that in the future, the land of Israel is going to extend itself outwards exponentially, and it's going to spread forth across the world. Meaning to say that anything that stands ready to be revealed in the future, if it bears the capacity to be revealed in the here and now, in spite of the fact that it's not yet happening, it means that we have accessibility to that secret. And so if Eretz Yisrael is meant to extend itself across reality and across the entirety of existence in the future, well, then the spiritual capacity of that continues to exist right now. And because the spiritual capacity exists right now, then the fact that Eretz Yisrael has not spread itself out across the entirety of the land doesn't detract from the reality that Eretz Yisrael is accessible wherever a person finds themselves. And so attaching ourselves to the concept of Eretz Yisrael can be an experience of the body, it can be an experience of the emotions, and it can be an experience of the mind. And what I want to talk about today is the psychological reality, the inner space of outside of Eretz Yisrael, inside of Eretz Yisrael, and the boundary and the mesach, that partition that seems to separate the two of them. Because when we can analyze deeply what these two concepts represent on an inner level, we'll begin to see the illumination that comes forth from the process of recovery and the confrontation with difficulty and the overcoming and the revelation that comes about when I overcome what I thought was impossible to reveal the light of possibility in the places that I thought it was completely removed from me. Now, in this week's Parsha, we encounter one of the most significant and cataclysmic moments in Jewish history, in the history of existence, which is the Chet of the Meraglim, the sin of the spies who were sent out by Moshe Rabbeinu himself to examine the land, to see the nature of the land, to study the land, to understand what it would mean spiritually, psychologically, physically, emotionally. What would the transition into the land actually represent? And these individuals, these lofty individuals, refined individuals, searched out, and they came back ashen-faced with the recognition that it's far too great for us to manage. It's far too overwhelming for us to manage. We're not big enough to manage it. We're not strong enough to manage it. Looking at the land elicited all of the fear and the limitation of self. As we know, the famous teaching from the Kotzker Rebbe, that the Meraglim said, we appeared in their eyes, in the eyes of the residents, the giants of Eretz Yisrael, we appeared in their eyes as grasshoppers. They're not saying that they overheard them saying that they were grasshoppers, the external reality of being small, but rather we saw ourselves in their eyes as if we were small, meaning to say that when a person looks at the concept of Eretz Yisrael, immediately the emotional space is going to be, I am not strong enough, I'm not capable enough, I don't have enough faith, I don't have enough strength and perseverance to push myself into that difficult place. And the Meraglim came back and they said, it's too much, we can't do it. They weren't speaking bad about the land itself. They were speaking bad about themselves. They were speaking about how it's possible that the human being doesn't have the capacity of managing the spiritual responsibility and the emotional responsibility that comes with the maturity of Eretz Yisrael. And being honest and vulnerable with themselves, they created a response system that led to mourning, and it led to the belief that it's impossible to enter into the land. They mistook their strengths. They looked at the land and they said, it's dangerous, it's overwhelming, it's too much for us emotionally, psychologically. There's just too much going on. Every moment demands all of your energy. It is the full catastrophe in every moment. All senses need to be activated in order for a person to process even a moment's step in Eretz Yisrael. It's a different place. It's a different orientation, and the Meraglim came to be aware of this. In Eretz Yisrael, there's no separation between depth and surface. Everything is what it is fully, which means that there's no way for a person to hide from reality. A person has to face reality, which is why Hashem's eyes are on Eretz Yisrael from the beginning of the year to the end of the year, because it demands that much hashgacha. Because left to its own devices, Eretz Yisrael will swallow a person up emotionally, spiritually. The concept of Eretz Yisrael, the concept of the place, the concept of there being a destination point in my life that I need to arrive at so that I can truly encounter myself. That's a heavy possibility for people to think about. And therefore, the Meraglim represent all of us in our resistance towards accepting the possibility of there being such a place. The resistance of believing that it does, in fact, need to be crossed over in order to get to the other side. And so we fight and we repress that feeling and we push back against it. And that's what the Meraglim did. The Meraglim came back and they said it's too much for us. And that created a cause and effect, which throughout the entirety of our history, we live with a certain part of ourselves that tells us that it's too much for us. It's too much to live with an illumination of attention and intention and a hyper focus on the singular center point that rests at the core of my experience. It's too hard to focus each day. It's too hard to have kavanah. It's too hard to do the next right thing. All of these things are contained within the Chet of the Meraglim. All of these things are contained within that first gesture, that first all-too-human response that in the face of something illuminated, in the face of an eye-to-eye experience that demands a severity of attention and a sobriety of the mind and the heart, that our first reaction is to say, it is too big for me. It is too big for me. I cannot bear this burden, and therefore I will choose to remain outside. I will choose to remain outside of the boundary. I will choose to remain in that mindset of chutz la'aretz, in that mindset that says there's no significance, there's no innermost point. And the Heilige Balatanya, Schus Yagen Aleinu, the Heilige Balatanya teaches us in Likutei Torah that on an inner level, what was happening here with the Chet and the Meraglim was this encounter between these leaders of Klal Yisrael, these Heilig Neshamos, those Neshamos that felt that they had everything in order, those Neshamos that they felt that they had learned how to control the circumstances of their lives. And then facing the nature of Eretz Yisrael, they said, this place is chaos. The concept of Eretz Yisrael is going to take us away from the stability of our lives that we have previously developed. Because there's a spiritual principle that, yes, organization and manageable reality is the goal. There is a light that emerges from the concept of Eretz Yisrael, from Malchus herself, which tells us that in truth, all of the organization and all of the framing and all of the control that we have from a bottom-up level in our lives and that we assume that we have must undergo a shift that teaches us that I'm not in control of anything. We need to go from a place of Seder into Loka Seder. Chutz la'aretz, prior to entering into Eretz Yisrael, the Meraglim were functioning in a place of Seder. They had the nisim, they had their clothes prepared, they had their food prepared, there was no sickness, there was no struggle, things were good, there was revelation. It was clear what the day brought, it was clear what today was, what the middle of the day was, what the night was going to be. And that comfortable space of the midbar, that comfortable space where a person doesn't have to worry about much, where a person doesn't have to be bothered by the inner workings of the self or the outer workings of the self, does provide a very real place for spiritual cultivation. A person has attentional space, a person is free to contemplate God's creation, a person is free to look at life from a grandiose perspective of an ideal. That only comes about when there's calmness, when there's Yishuv Hadas, when things are Keseder. And when the Meraglim saw Eretz Yisrael, they said that place is the opposite. That place is Shelo Keseder. It's the place in the mind where we come to terms with the fact that we're not in control of anything. And that all there is Hashgacha, and all there is HaKadosh Baruch Hu's perpetual governance, which reflects on the fact that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is in truth the only thing that actually exists. It was a lo kaseder. Eretz Yisrael represents a place of chaotic drives, a place of not being in control, a place of perpetually being reminded that one is not in control. And in the mindset of the Meraglim, being asked to transition from an inner state of being that operates in accordance with sturdy control and calmness and seder and an orderly way of functioning, and looking towards a task to enter into the opposite place of shalok seder, of things being chaotic, of not knowing which way is up and which way is down, of not knowing what the next step for me is, of not knowing which way to cultivate my relationship with that innermost point in my heart. Very naturally and all too human, the Meraglim says, why would we want to transition from a place of functionality into a place of dysfunctionality? Why would we want to go into a place where things seem to be working into a way of living that's not going to work for us? Why would we want to transition from a place of relief from pain into a place of exposure to the possibility of pain? And again, we can now see how these are the very questions that rest at the heart of any psychological development that a person is going through. Any step towards recovery, any step towards taking the next right step also includes within it the willingness to overcome something that appears difficult, because there's no transition to the next level without breaking through that which appeared to be impossible. And so every step of growth demands this very encounter that the Meraglim are experiencing, tasked with the recognition that I am going to transition from Chutz La'aretz, the place of Seder, where things are easy, where things are manageable, into a place of Eretz Yisrael, into a place of chaos, into a place of Malchus, into a place that only HaKadosh Baruch Hu has control over, and there's no human control whatsoever. The transition from ease into difficulty is a burdensome task, and it's terrifying and driven by the general pleasure principle, which says that I want to live a life of least resistance. So it's all too human for the Meraglim to have said, we don't want to enter in there. It's too difficult. It's too hard for us. But the secret of Eretz Yisrael is exactly that. The secret of Eretz Yisrael is that in spite of the fact that it looks too difficult, in spite of the fact that it looks too strong, in spite of the fact that it looks too overwhelming, in spite of the fact that the chaos and the loss of control and the powerlessness and the faith and the feminine quality of receptivity rather than the masculine tendency towards expression, in spite of the fact that all of those orient the person to a new way of functioning, to a new way of vulnerability, to a way of operating where you're not nearly as certain about anything as you were in the past, in spite of the fact that it looks terrifying, in spite of the fact that it looks difficult, in spite of the fact that it might even feel impossible. The secret of entering into Eretz Yisrael and the tikkun of the Chet HaMeraglim is realizing that it is possible. In spite of the fact that it looks impossible, it's not impossible. It's possible. It's difficult, but it's not impossible. There's difficulty and there's impossibility. The Chet of the Meraglim is looking at difficulty and saying it's impossible. The tikkun to the Chet HaMeraglim is looking at that which appears to be impossible and saying it is simply difficult, and in spite of the fact that it might be uncomfortable, I can still push myself forward and overcome the preventions that stand in my way. Eretz Yisrael, recovery, they represent the mindset where I am maturing, but that maturation process is going to leave me feeling much lower than I was feeling previously. When I decide to enter into a place of living in accordance with truth, of living in accordance with recovery principles, and living in accordance with pushing myself forward against the grain of what I feel is possible or impossible for me, and being moser my nefesh, it's going to feel like a profound degradation. It's going to feel like I have just fallen to the basement level. It's going to feel like I have not even started anything. And that the things that I knew about my life and the controls that I had placed in my life, it's going to feel like I've lost it. It's going to be an element of ki avi v'imi azavuni v'Hashem yaspeni, that my father and my mother have left me. My father and my mother, the mindsets of chachma and bina, of knowing what is what, of knowing what I need to do. Those things are with a person in a mindset of chutz la'aretz, when things are organized, when things are natural, and where the world seems to be a very domesticated thing. But when a person comes to the land of Eretz Yisrael, when a person enters into a mindset of Eretz Yisrael and is willing to cast off those burdens of ease for the sake of tolerating that which appears to be difficult and pushing oneself against the grain, against their limitation, revealing more and more from within the expanses of the self, it's going to be more difficult, but it's a breakthrough. It's a new malchus. It's a breaking through to the other side where, yes, it might not feel as easy, but it's specifically within the difficulty, specifically within the head-first encounter with that which is in front of me at this particular moment, with all of what I have, with the gathering of the strength of my mind, of my heart, and my body itself, all in the hopes of making it through this moment. In that, a person uncovers far more of themselves than they're capable of experiencing in the ease of things. Nobody wants to go down into difficulty. Nobody wants to experience struggle in their life. But those of us who experience struggle and those of us who encounter difficulty, what we must understand is that that is an entrance into Eretz Yisrael, that is an encounter with a new Malchus, and every ounce of prevention and difficulty and struggle that we can't fix through the hishtadlus of our own hands, each and every ounce of that is an opportunity to reveal more of the light of my soul, more of the light of myself, more of the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu into my experience. Because in spite of the fact that it feels more difficult now, nevertheless, I'm encountering far more of myself. I'm forced to dig down deep into the very recesses of the soul, to home el to home kora. I'm forced to uncover those potencies that rest hidden at the base of the self, those things that have been hidden from the 6 days of creation, the Gvura Elyona, the Ezehu Gibor HaKoivesh Yitzro, someone who is able to overcome the secret of self-overcoming, the secret of limitation for the sake of expression, of the recognition of limitation for the sake of wholeness. Those are the midos that a person is called upon to encounter in Eretz Yisrael. To believe that I have an inherent wholeness within myself because I'm not going to find it on the outside. In a Chutz La'aretz mindset, a person can find sipuk on the outside. A person can draw their sustenance from the outside of reality. In Eretz Yisrael and an Eretz Yisrael mindset, the only place that a person can draw the sustenance and stability of reality is from the inside. Is from the Nakuda Hapnimis in the Lave, because the outside is so overwhelming that it forces a person to dig down deep into the Evan Hashasiyah. David HaMelech, who represents the mindset of Eretz Yisrael, of that Malchus, he teaches us what's the condition of Eretz Yisrael. It's the inability to sleep because I am digging for the place of the Beis HaMikdash. I am perpetually digging to that hidden place of Das. I am perpetually uncovering more and more of myself in the hopes of coming to that place of finding order within disorder, of being okay even when things are not okay. And that mindset cannot be cultivated necessarily in Chutz La'aretz. It cannot be cultivated in the mindset of the Midbar. It cannot be cultivated in that place of ease, in that place of the Moichin and the Oros. Eretz Yisrael is a place of Levushim. Rabbi Nachman, when his Talmidim asked him, Rabbeinu, why are you going through this life-changing process to enter into the place of Eretz Yisrael? The Moichin of Eretz Yisrael, the body of Eretz Yisrael, whichever way that we're orienting ourselves towards the secret of Eretz Yisrael. They said, Rabbeinu, we know that you can be zocha to anything that you want while you're right here. Why do you have to travel? You could be zocha to anything. And Rabbi Nachman says, you know what, you're right. I can be zocha to anything that I want. But here, prior to the arrival in Eretz Yisrael, I can be zocha to it all. I can merit all of it on the level of lights, where there's no prevention, where there's no difficulty, where there's no concealment and no darkness, in the place of fluid spirituality and an orderly way of living where things appear to work because they work. But in Eretz Yisrael, says Rabbi Nachman, I'm only able to zoicha in Eretz Yisrael, I'm able to be zoicha to the lights within Levushim. It's not only the lights that I experience in Eretz Yisrael, it's the vessels as well. Now, one might think that that's a strange equation because lights are much higher than vessels. And one would assume that the journey towards Eretz Yisrael is the attempt to move from vessels into lights. So how could it be that in Eretz Yisrael, which we assume to be a higher state of being, represents a lower level of grasp, which is the levushim, the garments, the externality of things, the midos, the way I feel as a human being, not as a neshama, but as a neshama stuck in a guf. But the secret is that it's specifically in Eretz Yisrael, by going down into the place of Eretz Yisrael, to be yoyred into that place of Eretz Yisrael, in the mind, that place of encountering the fact that I'm not in control of anything whatsoever, and all of the organized elements of my day-to-day life that allow me to feel so comfortable in the assumption that things will perpetually continue the way they are cast off to the ground when a person enters into the place of Eretz Yisrael. And they're forced to realize that if it is not for the grace of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in this particular moment, as avaditi bi'oni, and a person is forced to live with einayim pekuchos, with open eyes to see the hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every moment, because without the hashgacha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in every moment, a person can't move forward in the land of Eretz Yisrael, in the mindset of Eretz Yisrael. It's in that recognition that I'm going to have to enter into the concealment valves of spirituality, into the tzimtzumim, into the levushim, into the externalities of self, into the robust inner experience of the vulnerability and the waves of emotional space. In those places of difficulty, it's specifically there that I get to encounter when I enter into Eretz Yisrael, when I enter into a place of katnas. As Rabbi Nachman said, the only way to enter into Eretz Yisrael, which is the gadlus shebegadlus, the greatness of all greatness, a person has to go through katnas shebekatnas. A person has to go through smallness of smallness. Why? Because in Eretz Yisrael, the smallness of smallness is revealed to be the greatness of greatness. That every ounce of encounter, when a person chooses to illuminate their mind and their heart and their body with the belief that there is a center point to my existence, which is HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which means that I am not in control and I relinquish control and I relinquish my desire towards power and I relinquish all of those things that are working so well for me in the midbar and all of those tendencies that are so unquestionable. And I'm willing to follow the direction and to jump without mind, to leap with faith into the place of Eretz Yisrael, into the place of chaos, into the place of the centermost point of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Ratzon in this world, of a place that at once is filled with destruction and also filled with building, and a place that is filled with severity but also with grace. In that hidden place of Yerushalayim, of Yira and Shalom, of wholeness and deficiency at once, it's specifically the decision to enter into that place in our lives and the willingness to find God in that place of concealment that represents the true gift of Eretz Yisrael. And this is what Rabbi Nachman means when he says that find God in the preventions themselves. In the life of recovery, in the life of struggle, a person will encounter so many difficulties, so many processes and unthinkable thoughts or frightening thoughts or difficult emotions. There'll also be very beautiful things. There'll also be immense positive experience, but human experience is a mixed bag, and there's no denying it. And if one wants to expose themselves to one edge of it, they have to naturally expose themselves to the other edge of it. As Rabbi Nachman describes, that belief brings within itself two fundamental truths. On the one hand, I can fix, and on the other hand, I can break. If you believe that you can break, believe that you can fix. The singular thing that remains true in both edges of that oppositional statement of believing that I can break and believing that I can fix is that I believe. And belief already, by definition, contains within itself the bipolarities of breaking and fixing. That the same belief power that gives value to what I've broken can give value to what I'm fixing. And if I see my breaking as something that is significant in a way that makes me feel bad, then I must also believe on the same edge that my fixing is going to be something significant on the other side as well. That to be exposed to the light of Emunah, which is the light of Eretz Yisrael, is to be exposed to the mixed bag nature of things, to the up and the down, to the two-sided nature of things, which is necessary for there to be an element of Emunah. Because all of this, all of the rigidity, all of the concealment, all of the struggles that a person enters into, when they enter into a life of seriousness and they learn to take themselves less seriously, and they open themselves up to the powerlessness that abides at the heart of their experiences, and they give it over to God and they allow God to give his power over to the individual so that the person becomes a shliach for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In Eretz Yisrael, each and every person who enters into the mindset of Eretz Yisrael, into the emotional space of Eretz Yisrael, into the place of Eretz Yisrael, is a shliach, is now a messenger, a merkava for HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the light of our higher power, to draw down that light into the lowest place imaginable, thereby revealing that it's in truth the highest place unimaginable. Because the Evan Hashsiyah, the center point of existence, is the shorish of all of the tzimtzumim. And the fact that we can draw HaKadosh Baruch Hu down, Kavyachol, into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and that we can endow a specific place which is beyond place with the value of significance. What we've done is we've come to reveal that all of the minimization and the smallness and the intensity of being human in the physicalized form of it and the pure materiality of all things, it's specifically there that we're going to reveal the light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's infinite light. That's our shlichus. And every time a person enters into that place of the willingness to face another day of intensity or difficulty, where a person relinquishes the attempts of control and acknowledges the powerlessness that abides at the heart of all things, and lives with the mindset of Rokeh ha'aretz al hamayim, that the land is not stable, but rather it is spread forth across the water at every moment. And that, yes, while we believe that the world rests on the pillar of a tzaddik, nevertheless, if we look in the Zohar HaKadosh, what we see is that the world rests upon the fin of the Leviathan that is swimming through the sea. Meaning to say it's an unstable thing, Tola Eretz al Belima, that the land is spread out upon nothingness, upon that which is without substantiality, which means that in each and every moment I have to reconnect myself to the only possible source of substantiality and alrightness, which is the Makom Shel Olam, which is the secret of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. In a place of Eretz Yisrael, in a mindset of Eretz Yisrael, a person rests at the edge of losing their minds, which pushes a person to the very reality that the only thing that will give me moichin right now is a direct attachment to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is what the Vitebsker says, the Priya Haaretz, the Heilige Priya Haaretz, that when a person enters into Eretz Yisrael, when a person enters into a mindset to do the next right thing, in spite of the fact that it feels more powerless and more chaotic, and I no longer have those rigid perspectives of self-control that I thought I had, but I allow myself to uncover more, first and foremost, the person is going to experience it as a yerida. It's going to feel like I am falling down. It's going to feel like I am struggling. But a person must persevere, and a person must come to the place of understanding that when I push on through to the other side, what I thought was impossible gets turned into something that was just difficult, and I extend myself and I expand the territory of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's light in my life. There's no greater joy than this. There's no greater joy than the joy of self-overcoming, of applying a limit to what I thought was impossible, and revealing the more from within the less, and revealing the infinite light of God that exists within me, which is the source of my capacity to make the next right step. That's the light that's revealed. That's what it means when we say Toiva ha'aretz ma'oid ma'oid. Ma'oid means exponentially, exponential growth, the doubling of something, the perpetual growth of something far beyond what it should theoretically be able to be giving over. It's a flame that exceeds the potential of the oil that drives it. Secret of Hanukkah, the secret of Chaim, the secret of Eretz Yisrael. And when a person pushes themselves forward through the secret of Ma'od, and we know that Ma'od, Tov Ma'od, Ze Yitzhahara, Ze Malachamaves, Ma'od is severity, Ma'od is intensity, but it's specifically the intensity of our experience which becomes the driving force, that centrifugal force that perpetually illuminates experience with more and more intensity, which becomes the movement and the shifts that enable us to create more vessels to reveal the light of Hashem. Because when things are self-same in the mindset of Chutz La'aretz, so Hashem is singular. Hashem is singular in the way that he expresses himself. But when a person descends down into the rapid, shifting, changing colors of experience on a day-to-day, moment-to-moment level, so the singular unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu remains the same, but the vessels through which it's going to be revealed become variated and individualized and particularized so that the images become far more beautiful. What Rabbi Nachman describes as the yichud hapashat, that's yosei mehagvanim hamishtanim, the unified simplicity and the simple unity that emerges from the chamber of changing colors. That's the secret of unity. The many that form into the one, the multiplicity that expresses itself in the light of unity, the difficulty that is seen through the lens of purpose, of meaning, of the lower kolchos expressing themselves and attaching themselves directly to the higher power from which they come, which allows me to elevate this worldly experience back up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, back up to my higher power, to reveal that I can find you in the darkness as well. This is the secret of Tova Ha'aretz Ma'od Ma'od. There's a Ma'od Ma'od, and it demands a Ma'od Ma'od Have Shachar Ruach, that a person has to encounter that light of humility, that light of anonymity, that light of not needing to be the center, because every place that I walk is the center. There is no center in the mindset of Eretz Yisrael, because everywhere is the center. Every place that a person looks, a person encounters nitzchius, a person encounters all that can possibly be revealed. The opportunity to encounter the light of godliness and to draw down the infinite light of comfort and calmness into the chaotic experience of the mind that is trapped within a body. That is the koyach of Eretz Yisrael. That's the koyach of a life in recovery, where every moment becomes revelatory. Every moment becomes a Matan Torah moment. Every moment becomes the opportunity to transition from the lowest place in the world, from the Katnish Shabakatnis, into the Godlish Shabagadlis. It's Zos, it's Malchus, Bazos Yavo Aaron El Kodesh, specifically in the thisness and the ground of it, in the working the fields, in the working of the hands, in the labor of the mind, in the day-to-day ups and downs of a life of attentional focus. This appears so different than devoid of the illumination of the ease that we experienced in the Midbar. But again, it represents the capacity to encounter the infinite light that moves through us and reveals itself through us. The powerlessness, the power that comes about from within powerlessness itself. The infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which ascends from below just as it descends from above. In Chutz La'aretz, in the Midbar, we know that the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu descends from above to below. We know the secret of Oros, because Oros are the same. But in Eretz Yisrael, we come to understand the secret of the infinite light of HaKadosh Baruch Hu ascending from below to above. Because only here are the levushim, only here in the mindset of the hyper-focus on doing the next right thing and focusing my mind instead of allowing myself to live the easy way of living. It's specifically there that I'm going to illuminate the infinite capacity of my ability to become more than I am. That's the secret of Eretz Yisrael. That's what the Meraglim were afraid of, and it's our job to enter into difficulty, to enter in, not to celebrate difficulty, not to say that I want difficulty, but to be aware that difficulty is the pathway towards which I'm going to encounter the illumination of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in my life, the light of my higher power. And that by going through the struggles and by going through the process, that's where the light of redemption comes from. the willingness to persevere within the difficulty, the willingness to not be overwhelmed or bothered by the fact that it's difficult, but simply to push on through to the other side. Every place that I walk, says Rabbi Nachman, I'm walking to Eretz Yisrael. Every step is a movement against the resistance. If a person is conscious, if a person is aware, if a person is honest with themselves, they will encounter that light of lo keseder, even in Chutz La'aretz. They'll be able to say, nothing is right here. Everything is broken. The world is broken. The world is a nishbar dika thing. As Avram Avinu came to understand, the world is on fire. And so every place that I walk, every step that a person takes with that awareness of that katnish shabakatness is now a step towards the godless shabagadlus, is the awareness that I am moving towards the acceptance of things. I'm moving towards faith. I'm moving towards the recognition that I'm okay even though I'm not okay. That I'm okay even though I'm not okay. And things are okay even though they're not okay. And things are beseder even when they're lo keseder. And that even though things are difficult, they're still possible. And even though things appear dark, they're still light. And even though things appear to be mitzumsum, they're still expressed. And even though things seem to be scary, there's still calmness, etc., 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 etc. It's the land of etc. V'chule. V'chule is v'chaf vav, yud ke vav ke. The secret over here in the mindset of Eretz Yisrael, there's no amount of words that can cover or convey the experience of the face-to-face moment and encounter with reality, the bareness of reality, the thin surface of functionality that a person is forced to run directly up to the most potent form of experience, which is the infinite light of God. And when we allow ourselves to tolerate difficulty, to tolerate uncomfortable feelings in order to work through them, to tolerate that which appears to be hard in order to break on through to the other side, we are settling the land of Israel. We are uncovering the light of redemption within our lives. And that is our job in the Chet of the Meraglim, to be metakin the Chet of the Meraglim, is to celebrate our lives in spite of the fact that there's difficulty, to encounter the difficulty not with a mindset of saying, I wish it was so much better, but because it's this way, so I just have to deal with it, but rather the recognition that the difficulty itself represents the point of breakthrough, and that the way that I experience my life is exactly how Hashem wants me to experience my life, including the difficulties, and it's my job to break on through to the other side, and Be'ezras Hashem will be zocha to the light being revealed, and the perpetual revelation of light that comes about specifically through the cultivation of vessels through our own limited experiences, to be zocha to the secret of the redemption of Eretz Yisrael, of seeing eye to eye, of ayin ba'ayin yiru b'shuv Hashem Tzion, when Hashem returns to Sion itself, which brings us back to the innermost point of the singular purpose of all things, that place of Eretz Yisrael in our mind and heart, which is the emergence of the redemption of the soul, of experience and history itself.